What?
Hi, San.
Hi guys.
House.
How's your hearing, Amy? Kumusta?
Senator Aquilino Coco Pimentel III will lead the chamber in prayer.
Our Father, we are in very difficult times. We pray for your help and continued blessings. The pandemic has reminded us of our mortality. Life on earth is short, and any one of us could be gone in an instant. The pandemic has made us realize the importance of family, friends, and community. Our life, as well as other people's lives, matter. We thank you for the gift of life and ask you that you bless us with the virtues of compassion and solidarity. The pandemic has caused tremendous hardships. Many have lost their jobs and sources of livelihood. Many have been evicted from their homes. Many lives have been disrupted. We pray for you to give us these days our daily bread. The pandemic has caused the loss of lives. We condole with all the families who have lost loved ones during this pandemic. Eternal rest grant unto them, O Lord, and let perpetual light shine upon them. May their souls, through the mercy of God, rest in peace. And for those who make policies and rules to help the Filipino people get through these difficult times, please help and guide them. Please show them what and where the best interest of the Filipino people is in each circumstance. We thank you, Lord, for the privilege of serving the Filipino people. May we as legislators be your instrument in giving renewed hope to our people for a better future and in bringing actual changes in our society which will be beneficial to our people now and in the generations to come. We humbly seek your loving mercy and ask that you forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who have trespassed against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil, and let thy will be done in the Philippines, Almighty Father. Amen.
Amen. The secretary will please call the roll.
Roll call of members, the Honorable Senators. Angara.
Present.
Binay.
Present.
Cayetano.
Present.
De Lima. De La Rosa.
Present.
Drilon. Gatchalian. Go.
Present.
Gordon.
Presente, señorita.
Ontiveros.
Present.
Lacson. Lapid. Marcos.
Present.
Pacquiao.
Present.
Pangilinan.
Present.
Pimentel III.
Present.
O.
Present.
Recto.
Present.
Revilla.
Present.
Tolentino.
Present.
Villanueva. Villar. Zubiri.
Present.
Senate President Soto III.
with 5 senators physically present and 18 senators virtually present for a total of 23, the chair declares the presence of a quorum. Majority Leader?
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I move that we dispense with the reading of the Journal of the 13th Session, Monday, September 21, 2020, and consider the same as approved.
Any objection? It hears none. Motion is approved.
Mr. President, before we take up other business, I would just like to congratulate you and greet you a happy anniversary. All of us would like to greet you a happy anniversary, sir. Boss SP. Congratulations to how many years po of marriage?
51.
51 years of marriage. Mabuhay po kayo.
It's equivalent to reclusion perpetua without the possibility of parole.
May we recognize Senator Drilon, Mr. President, is raising his hand.
I am sure that our Senate President is happily married for 51 years. Now I have to ask Helen if she shares the same view.
Oh boy. With that, Mr. President, I move that we proceed with the reference of business.
Yes, Secretary, will proceed with the reference of business.
Reference of business, messages from the House of Representatives. Letter from the House of Representatives informing the Senate that on 16 September 2020, it passed the following House bills in which it requests the concurrence of the Senate. House number 7528, an act declaring the foreshore areas that line the Albay West Coast in the 3rd District of the province of Albay as tourist spots and appropriating funds therefore.
Referred to the Committees on Tourism, Environment, and Finance.
House number 7529, an act declaring the municipality of Jovellar in the province of Albay an ecotourism zone and appropriating funds therefore.
To the Committees on Tourism, Environment, and Finance.
House number 7530, an act declaring the city of Iligan a tourism development area and appropriating funds therefore.
To the Committees on Tourism, Environment, and Finance.
House number 7533, an act declaring Barangay Lagit, Padilla in the municipality of Bugalyon, province of Pangasinan an ecotourism zone and appropriating funds therefore.
To the Committees on Tourism, Environment, and Finance.
House number 7534, an act declaring the Limahong Channel located in the municipality of Lingayen, province of Pangasinan a tourist spot and appropriating funds therefore.
To the Committees on Tourism, Environment, and Finance.
House number 7535, an act declaring Mudlom Cave in the municipality of Quezon, province of Palawan a tourist destination, providing for its development and appropriating funds therefore.
To the Committees on Tourism. Is this 7535?
Yes.
Tourism, Environment, and Finance.
House number 7537, an act establishing campuses of the Davao del Norte State College, DNSC, in the municipality of Carmen and Santo Tomas, and in the island garden city of Samal, province of Davao del Norte, to be known respectively as the DNSC Carmen Campus, DNSC Santo Tomas Campus, and DNSC Island Garden City of Samal Campus, and appropriating funds therefore.
To the Committees on Higher Education and Finance.
House number 7565, an act establishing a campus of the Compostela Valley State College in the municipality of Nabunturan, province of Davao de Oro, to be known as the Compostela Valley State College Nabunturan Campus and appropriating funds therefore.
To the Committees on Higher Education and Finance.
House number 7566, an act converting the Occidental Mindoro State College in the municipality of San Jose, province of Occidental Mindoro, into a state university to be known as the Occidental Mindoro State University and appropriating funds therefore.
To the Committees on Higher Education and Finance.
House number 7539, an act establishing a central multi-species marine hatchery in the municipality of Barotac Viejo, province of Iloilo, and appropriating funds therefor.
To the Committees on Agriculture and Finance.
House number 7541, an act establishing a satellite multi-species marine hatchery in the municipality of San Fernando, province of Camarines Sur, and appropriating funds therefore.
To the Committees on Agriculture and Finance.
House number 7543, an act establishing a satellite multi-species marine hatchery in the municipality of Pasacao, province of Camarines Sur, and appropriating funds therefore.
To the Committees on Agriculture and Finance.
House number 7544, an act establishing a central multi-species marine hatchery in the city environmental estate of Barangay Santa Lucia, city of Puerto Princesa, province of Palawan, and appropriating funds therefore.
To the Committees on Agriculture and Finance.
House number 7545, an act establishing a central multi-species marine hatchery in the municipality of Villaba, the satellite multi-species marine hatcheries in the municipalities of Calubian and Leyte, province of Leyte, and appropriating funds therefore.
To the Committees on Agriculture and Finance.
House number 7547, an act establishing a satellite multi-species marine hatchery in the municipality of Batad, province of Iloilo, and appropriating funds therefore.
to the Committees on Agriculture and Finance,
And House Number 7556, an act establishing a central multi-species marine hatchery in the municipality of Minalabak, province of Camarines Sur, and appropriating funds therefore.
to the Committees on Agriculture and Finance,
Letter from the Secretary General of the House of Representatives dated 16 September 2020, informing the Senate that pursuant to Republic Act Number 9520, the House of Representatives has constituted the Oversight Committee on Cooperatives, Chairperson Representative Sabiano S. Canama, members Representative Jose Gay G. Padiernos, Representative Willie S. Caminero, Representative Janice D. Salimbangon.
to the Committee on Rules,
Letter from the Secretary General of the House of Representatives dated 18 September 2020, informing the Senate that pursuant to Republic Act Number 9520, the House of Representatives included Representative Godofredo Guyas, member of the Oversight Committee on Cooperatives.
to the Committee on Rules,
Bill on first reading, Senate Number 1838, entitled Isang Batas na Nagtatakda ng Hindi Bababa sa 9 na Unit ng Asignaturang Pilipino at 3 unit ng Asignaturang Panitikan sa Kurikulum ng Kolehiyo, introduced by Senator Pangilinan.
to the Committees on Higher Education and Finance. There is additional reference of business.
Additional reference of business committee reports. Committee report number 114, prepared and submitted jointly by the Committees on Trade, Commerce, and Entrepreneurship and Local Government on Senate number 1839 with Senators Gatchalian and Pimentel III as authors thereof, entitled An Act Requiring the Employment of Qualified Lifeguards in All Public Swimming Pools and Bathing Facilities and Providing Penalties for Violation thereof, recommending its approval in substitution of Senate Bill number 748, sponsor Senator Pimentel III.
To the calendar for ordinary business.
Committee report number 115, prepared and submitted by the Committee on Trade, Commerce, and Entrepreneurship on Senate number 1840 with Senators Drilon, Gatchalian, Marcos, Zubiri, and Pimentel III as authors thereof, entitled An Act Amending Republic Act number 8762, otherwise known as the Retail Trade Liberalization Act of 2000, by lowering the required paid-up capital for foreign retail enterprises and for other purposes, recommending its approval in substitution of Senate Bill numbers 14, 921, 1113, and 1349, taking into consideration House number 59, sponsor Senator Pimentel III.
To the calendar for ordinary business. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, this is a reply. Before we take up the agenda, Mr. President, we just like to reply on the inquiry raised by Senator Lacson, Senator Panfilo Lacson yesterday on the plenary session concerning the referral of bills, Senate Bill number 755, 1042, 1370, 1419, and 1785. Mr. President, after conferring with the Bills and Index and our Senate Legal, we've come to the conclusion that the referral of bills and resolutions are based on general jurisdiction of standing committees as specified in the rules of the Senate, Rule 10, Section 13, and precedents of referrals of previous Congresses. In cases where the measures covers subject matters falling within the jurisdiction of more than one committee, the same is referred to not more than two committees or at times allowed by our rules up to a third committee. Careful assessment of the provisions of the measures are also considered. Apparently, Mr. President, the two bills, Senate Bill number 1785, authored by Senator Gordon and Senator Go, and under Senate Bill number 1370, authored by Senator Pacquiao, were referred to the National Defense Committee. And then, because these were prescribing, these were for retirement packages, or this the retirement plan, retirement program for uniformed military personnel. However, the other measures, Mr. President, had other agencies. Apparently, because they had the PNP, the Coast Guard, which is under the DOTR. So that those other bills were referred to the committees on government corporations and public enterprises. Although I debated with my staff today and I said, how can we have two committee reports, one from the Committee on National Defense and one from the Committee on Government Corporations, which are with exactly the same tenure, which is creation of our insurance system or retirement pension system for these agencies. So, Mr. President, with the foregoing, together with the Senate Bill of Senator Recto, which is the Senate Bill number 755, which is also referred to the Committee on Government Corporations and Public Enterprises. So, with the foregoing, Mr. President, I move to consolidate the referral of these bills. With the consent of the body, I move that we transfer the referral of Senate Bill numbers 755 and 1042 to the Committee on National Defense as primary committee and to the Committee on Government Corporations and Public Enterprises as secondary committee, as well as the Committee on Finance. I so move, Mr. President.
Yes, I think that is the best recourse. Any objection? Chair hears none. Motion is approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I move to resume.
Uh,
Yes, Mr. President.
Parliamentary inquiry, Your Honor.
Senator Gordon is recognized.
Mr. President, we are supposed to pay for 5.5 trillion. We just needed a seed fund for this new bill, Mr. President. I would like to know whether the AFP RSBS, who lost all that money, has been held accountable for these losses, Mr. President. Because that's money that was hard earned by our soldiers, and apparently we do not know whatever happened to the money, and we don't know who was involved in the loss of the money, Mr. President. So before we even go into any investigation, is it proper that we find out if anybody knows where the money went, or has anybody been held accountable? Are there cases that have been filed against these people? Because if we don't do it, then it's bound to happen again, Mr. President.
Perhaps the best answer we can get from for that particular question or inquiry by Senator Richard Gordon is for the committees concerned to take it up and to find out so that we can give an intelligent answer to the question.
I just, Mr. President, forgive me, but I find it it's a hard. I find it hard to just come up with a new bill without really knowing what happened to it, and that's why I just caused this question. I don't need to have it answered, but apparently the major finding of the Senate Blue Ribbon Committee in those days that the very extensive real estate acquisitions made by RSBS had been attended by massive overpricing of such acquisitions. And they found that the real estate purchases by RSBS were uniformly documented by two sets of instruments. Firstly, a unilateral deed of sale executed by the seller of the property only, and secondly, a bilateral deed of sale covering the same piece of land executed by both the seller and the RSBS buyer. Price paid in the second bilateral instrument was invariably much higher than the price reflected in the unilateral deed of sale. And there was a loss of the RSBS in 1998 reported a loss of 759 million pesos, Mr. President. I'm just clarifying as a matter of point of information. In addition to that, in 1999, RSBS losses escalated to 994 million pesos. In 2000, RSBS losses decelerated to 416 million pesos. I don't know why. In 2001 to 38 million pesos. Mr. President, those are some of the items that we discovered. And in 30 July 2003, there was a commission created by the Supreme Court Justice Florentino Feliciano to conduct a fact-finding investigation of the 2003 Oakwood Rebellion. One of the grievances of the soldiers involved in the coup attempt was the corruption in the AFP RSBS. Mr. President, I only cite this because it seems like a broken record. We investigate and people, when we lose money that's supposed to go to our soldier, and I don't know if RSBS has been properly liquidated. This is the recommendation of Supreme Court Justice Feliciano, whether RSBS contributions have been returned to the soldiers, or whether we're initiating an AFP service and insurance system again, and whether we're going to implement fully the recommendations of the Senate Blue Ribbon Committee. Mr. President, to continue on in 2006, Executive Order number 590 was issued. The order deactivates the AFP RSBS by December 31, 2006, and directs the DND to study and prepare draft law creating new retirement and pension system for the military. And then a press release was issued on October 2011. A crisis looms in the military pension system as budgetary requirements for pensions are projected to overtake those for active personnel by 2016. And in 18 April 2016, Memorandum Order Number 90, abolition of the AFP-RSBS, privatization of its subsidiaries, winding down and liquidation of AFP-RSBS, and finally 2017, the Technical Working Group composed of DND, DBM, DOF, DILG, and GSIS recommended the creation of a seed fund necessary for the purpose of generating sufficient interest income to fund the annual pension requirements of all uniformed services. According to the latest actuarial study conducted by GSIS, if no reforms are introduced to the existing pension system, the seed fund shall require an amount equivalent to 5.57178 trillion pesos, Mr. President. That's how serious this is. And again, there is a resolution filed by the Congress modifying the base pay schedule for military and uniform on January 2, 2018. Resolution also allows for a second base pay schedule to be implemented beginning January 1, 2019. This will further increase the base pay of MUP rank starting from First Chief, Master Sergeant in the AFP, and those with equivalent rank up to the rank of General in the AFP, and those with equivalent rank by fiscal year 2019. The average increase will be 72.18%. It goes on and cites the way the pension package will be distributed, Mr. President. I just want to raise these points so that we know where we're headed when it comes to the investigation of this pension debacle that has not been settled. And it's one of those situations where justice has not been rendered to the soldier. Thank you very much, Mr. President. And I'm sorry for taking your time about it, Mr. President.
Thank you. We will place that on record. And perhaps the best thing to do, Majority Leader, is to refer the points raised by Senator Gordon to the proper committees to take it up.
Yes, Mr. President. Before we do that, we recognize Senator Drilon, who's raising his hand.
Senator
Right after the
Franco
matter.
recognize the Minority Leader.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just a comment on the referral after hearing Senator Gordon, particularly on the funds necessary. That's 5.7 trillion, if I got it.
5.6 trillion.
5.6 trillion. We noticed that the Ways and Means Committee is not a member of those committees to whom this issue is referred. Considering the substantial sums of money needed, may I submit to the Rules Committee that Ways and Means be included as a committee to hear the consolidated referrals. If that would be, if that's in order, we submit to the majority.
Yes, that is
Mr.
possible. A third committee or a fourth committee is possible in any referrals if it is the Ways and Means or the Finance.
Or finance. That's correct, Mr. President. With the permission of the body. With the permission of the body, I move that we have a fourth committee and this tackling these several measures. The fourth, sir, because we had the first was national defense, second by government, national government corporations and public enterprises, and then the committee on finance, and then the fourth will be committee on ways and means.
All right.
As long as there's no objection and duly accepted by all our colleagues.
Senator
Mr. President, I so
Gordon recognized.
Mr. President, in the interest of simplifying matters, after what I've stated, I don't think the Government Corporations Committee should handle this, Mr. President. Senator Drilon is correct, Mr. President. It should be handled by the Ways and Means Committee in support of the Committee on National Defense, because the findings are there, Mr. President. And there's nothing we can contribute unless we decide to put it under GSIS control. And GSIS right now is not willing unless it is made a separate entity and not commingled with the funds of GSIS. So there's nothing I think we can recommend. So I'd rather leave the committee out of it so that mas mabilis ang investigation and defense at saka ng Ways and Means, Mr. President.
Yes, Mr. President, with that manifestation of the chairman of the Committee on Government Corporations and Public Enterprises, I therefore amend my proposal, and I would like to move, Mr. President, instead that it will be handled by these measures, no? All these those measures consolidated to the Committee on National Defense as primary committee, and the secondary committee is Committee on Finance, as well as the third committee being Committee on Ways and Means. I so move, Mr. President. And the statements made by Senator Gordon be recorded as for the committee to discuss and tackle when we start the investigations.
In other words, also referred to those three committees. Any
Yes,
objection?
refer to the committees.
Hearing none. Motion is approved.
Mr. President, if I may.
Senator Ralph Recto, the President Pro Tem is recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I just wanted to make a manifestation, Mr. President. One is that I did file Senate Bill number 755. I've been looking at this problem for the last 10 years now, and I think there is a solution to this problem. With regard to the statement made by Senator Dick Gordon on the GSIS, actually in Senate Bill 755, we're proposing a Fund B. So it's not going to be commingled with the civilian employees. So there will be two funds, one for civilian, one for our uniformed personnel. So walang commingle. On the other issue, on the 5.6 trillion, these are solvable problems, Mr. President. I'll put it this way. The reason why that will go up to that amount, I don't know in how many years, but having said that, is that because the government promised that incidentally, the retirement benefits of our uniformed personnel is subsidized by taxpayers in the national budget. Okay? So there is no fund that is being administered by any entity today. It is all taxpayers' money. And we passed laws in the past that said when uniformed personnel retires, he gets a pension. And if the increase in salary of our uniformed persons go up, or rather, if there's an increase in salary of uniformed personnel, then the pension also increases. Okay? And of course, the retirement age is low at 55. So assuming you were to increase that 55 to 60, that 5.6 trillion will immediately drop, Mr. President. So these numbers are actually solvable. Okay? And the good thing about having a pension system, similar to GSIS, why should we reinvent the wheel? Why should we put up another entity when the GSIS already knows how to invest this money?
Yes.
Okay, so maybe we can have a Fund B there. That's all written in the bill that we're proposing, so that they manage it for the uniformed personnel. And maybe what we can do is, for those who we promise that this is your retirement, let's have a cutoff date. And then all new entrants, everyone who will be entering the uniform sector of our government, whether meaning to say military or police, all new entrants will have now a separate pension scheme, Mr. President. So in a nutshell, that is the proposal, Mr. President. So I look forward to hearing this in the Defense, GOCC, or Appropriations, or the Ways and Means Committee. Thank you, Mr. President.
All right. Thank you, Senator Recto. We have just been given what will transpire in the committee. Senator Sari Angara is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to share the sentiments of our Senate President Pro Tempore and Senator Gordon. And the Senate President will bear this out. The DBM Secretary already told us that the budgetary situation regarding this is no longer sustainable, Mr. President. In fact, he has said that the funds for retirement are now that we have to pay out, which, as Senator Recto correctly pointed out, is supported by taxpayer money, is now larger than the amount we are paying out, I think, for the salaries of our military personnel. So it's a unique situation that I think it doesn't exist in other pension systems and doesn't exist for other government officials. So his advice is for us to, as precisely mentioned by Senator Recto, our pro temp, is to really cut the umbilical cord at a future date to afford justice to those who may have reasonably relied on the expectation of a retirement, Mr. President. And that when exactly to cut that umbilical cord, I think that will be the biggest challenge before the committees hearing this measure. I just wanted to share that for the benefit of our members, Mr. President. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Senator, the Majority Leader is recognized.
Mr. President, I believe Senator Gordon would like to be recognized, sir.
Senator Richard Gordon is recognized.
My apologies and my thanks to Senator Recto. If that is where the committee, the study is headed, I agree that it should be under the Committee of National Defense. But if we're going to create a government corporation that is separate from the GOCC, although handled by government corporations, then with all due apologies, I'd like to handle that part of the investigation as chairman of the Government Corporations Committee. I think it's only fair, Mr. I don't want to skunk out of this situation because pupunta doon at pupunta yan. I-create tayo ng government corporation. Masasama na naman ako dyan. So, mabuti na yung nagsisiguro na hindi tayo nagkamali. Opo.
So what is the pleasure of the body, Senator, the Majority Leader?
Yes, I go back to my previous motion, Mr. President. We have already referred it to the three committees.
No, the suggestion is to include the Government Corporations Committee.
By the chairman? Four.
Yes.
My apologies, I wasn't listening.
Four.
I was just looking at something. Back to four.
Yes.
Okay. I go back to my previous motion, Mr. President, the motion from the very beginning. I move, Mr. President, that we refer all these bills to the committees on national defense as primary committee, and to the committee on local government corporation and public enterprises as secondary committee, and to the committees on finance and ways and means as the third and fourth committee, Mr. President, with the permission of the body. That can be done under our rules.
Oh, yes, of course, especially with the unanimous motion.
Yes, Mr. President.
Unanimous vote. Any objection? Hearing none. Motion is approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. Moving forward, Mr. President, I move that we consider Senate Bill number 1396 under Committee Report number 65.
Any objection? Hearing none, consideration is in order.
Yes, Mr. President, we're in the period of amendments. May I recognize the dear Senator, Chairperson of the committee, Senator Cynthia Villar.
Yes, the parliamentary status is yes, we are in the period of individual amendments. We are going to tackle the budget, the bill, based on the approved amendments as of September 21, 2020.
Mr. President,
Senator Villar is recognized.
Mr. President, we looked at the clean copy of the bill and we are going to add additional committee amendments to make it clear. So,
All right. My suggestion, if you don't mind, Your Honors, is that we now, because the other members of the Senate have individual amendments also, if we go back to the previous strategy of having the sponsor put in their amendments and then we will go back again, this is the best time for us to do it page by page.
okay.
So whoever has an amendment on the certain page, then let's do it. If not, we have moved forward. All right?
Okay.
So, okay. Are there any amendments on page 1?
None.
No amendments on page 1, page 2?
None.
No amendments on page 2?
Mr. President,
Senator Ontiveros, recognized.
thank you, Mr. President. This is more a clarification and, if necessary, a correction, Mr. President, good sponsor. I would just like to clarify that I proposed an amendment yesterday, which was accepted by the good sponsor on page 2, line 7A. And I recall that it was accepted to read, which is not more than 5 hectares. However, Mr. President, good sponsor, I find here in the clean copy that what is written on page 2, line 7A is which is more than 5 hectares. So I just like to reiterate yes, Mr. President.
It's a typographical error because the copies that were given to you were given
Yes,
to you earlier.
President.
But the actual copy that we have now here in the session hall in plenary is the correct one. There is the word not.
Thank you,
Not
Mr.
45.
President. And thank you, good sponsor. I just needed to confirm that, Mr. President, with the good sponsor, that indeed, as the Mr. President has said, it reads, which is not more than 5 hectares, not only because it is a mere reiteration of an earlier part of Section 3, but also to preclude the possibility that leaseback arrangements will contradict the intent of this definition of terms of coconut farmers. So with that, thank you, good sponsor, and thank you, Mr. President.
Any amendments on 2A? We go to page 3. Page 3. Any amendments on page 3?
None. None.
Mr. President.
Senator Pangilinan is recognized.
Yes, just a clarification. The question of amendments on per page, is this directed to all senators?
Yes. Yes.
I see, because if I may request, Mr. President, I only got the clean copy at 1:34 this afternoon, and I am still going through my amendments that I would like to incorporate. I don't think I can introduce the amendments today, Mr. President, after only receiving it just less than an hour and a half ago. We can probably begin the introduction of the amendments starting tomorrow, Mr. President. I apologize, but there are numerous amendments that we'd like to introduce, and we didn't have time to really go through it. We need more time to go through it, Mr. President.
Nevertheless, there are, may I allow me to answer, Your Honor? Nevertheless, there are 22 senators who can be ready with this period of individual amendments now to facilitate it. So let's proceed. And then perhaps the majority leader will not close the period of individual amendments later after we finish. And so we can finish it up tomorrow.
Mr. President,
Thank you, Mr. President.
Pilar is recognized.
my amendment is a committee amendments for clarification. So can I do it together with the individual amendments? We go through
Yes,
the process.
we are in the period of individual amendments only, Your Honor, because this is a substitute bill. There is no period of committee amendments.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so
Go
any
ahead.
amendments on page 3? We go to page 4. Any amendments on page 4? No amendments. 4A. No amendments. Page 5. No amendments. 5A. Senator Villanueva is recognized.
Thanks, Mr. President. With the indulgence of our committee chair and sponsor, on page 5A, line 17, after the word alleviation, insert the word education. So line 17 shall now read as follows: poverty alleviation, comma, education, comma, and social equity, comma.
What does the sponsor say?
I accept, Mr. President.
Accepted. Any objection?
Thank you.
Hearing none. Adopted.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Any more amendments on 5A? We go to page 6. Amendments on page 6?
I think Mr. Senator Villanueva will have amendment also in 5. It's recorded here that there are 5 amendments on
So
6.
just one actually, Mr. President. Page
So,
6.
page 6. So,
Yes.
Senator Villanueva.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, distinguished sponsor. On page 6, after line 5, insert a new subsection, subsection D, that will read as follows: innovative research projects and their practical application on coconut processing, production, and distribution towards developing the local coconut industry. Mr. President, not only we have to think about increasing the incomes of coconut farmers, we have to include, we believe, the need for education and for practical application of innovative research to further develop the coconut industry. And this is the reason why we are introducing this amendment, because we believe that we need to explicitly mention in this general principles of coconut industry development plan to remind implementing agencies that applied education and research go hand in hand with improving the incomes and the social equity of our coconut farmers. I hope that the distinguished sponsor would consider this amendment.
Mr. President, I accept.
Accepted. Any objection? Hearing none. Adopted.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. President.
Any other amendment on page 6?
Mr. President, on page 6, line 13, delete the word initial, and on line 14 of the same page, delete the words principal and trust fund income.
So we are deleting initial trust fund principal.
We are deleting the word initial in line 13 and in line 14, principal and trust fund income.
So it will now read funded by trust fund income. Funded by the trust fund income. Is that how it's going to read?
No, it's delete the words principal and trust fund income. Page 6.
There are two trust fund programs and projects to be funded by the trust fund.
Principal and trust fund income, which funding shall be itemized and broken. We will remove that, just the trust fund. We'll remove the principal and the trust fund income because we have enough principal.
So
Trust fund,
funded
okay?
by the trust fund income.
We will remove the principal and the trust fund income. Just the trust fund.
Just the trust fund.
Yes.
Trust fund, which funding or allocation shall be itemized?
O yun lang,
Yes.
trust fund lang ang may iwan.
Oh, yes.
All right.
Thank you,
Any
Mr.
objection?
President.
Hearing none. Amended. Adopted.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Any amendments on page 6? We go to page 7. Page 7. Any amendments on page 7?
Mr. President, I have one. On page 7,
Yes.
delete lines 5 to 7, and on line 9, insert the word and aftermarket promotion.
On line 9,
Insert the word and aftermarket promotion.
and yes, All right.
Okay.
Any objection? Hearing none. Adopted.
On the same page, line 10, delete the phrase direct lending and insert the word also.
Market roads also shall be funded through regular appropriations.
Yes. We remove
Adding the
direct
word
lending.
also,
Yeah.
because direct lending is already deleted.
Yes.
All right. Any objection? Hearing none. Adopted.
On the same page, line 11, insert the word "the" before the word regular.
D. Any objection? Hearing none. Adopted.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Any other amendments on page 6?
Just a clarification, Mr. President, how will lines 5 to 11 now read with all these amendments on page 7?
5 to 7, line 5 to line 7 has already been deleted.
Okay, thank you. 5 to 7.
Line
Thank
8
you.
lang.
Thank you.
The only change there is the word also and the. Okay?
Thank you.
Any other amendment on page 7? We go to page 8. Page 8. Amendments on page 8. Any amendments on 8A? Any amendments on 8B? Amendments on 8C?
Mr. President.
Yes, Senator Tiveros.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good sponsor, recalling that the sponsor was willing to accept this proposed amendment in spirit in an earlier page yesterday, but on her advice, on her guidance, introducing this now, I'd like to propose here on page 8C, on line 10, double T, after the word authority or after the words Cooperative Development Authority, CDA, to add the line for farmers cooperatives and local government units for coconut farmer organizations, period. LGUs shall create local small coconut farmers councils to provide mechanisms for consultation and participation. I so move, Mr. President.
We just want to check on where you want it placed.
Yes,
Because,
Mr. President.
There is no line 10 on page 8C. It's line 11.
NTT.
10 double T, Mr. President.
N
10 T, double T,
10 TT.
double T. Opo,
You want it,
Mr. President.
10 TT.
Yes, Mr. President, after authority CDA.
Cooperative Development Authority or CDA.
CDA. Yes, Mr. President.
Page 8C, line
Opo.
TT.
10 TT. Opo.
9.
Line 10 TT, double T.
Wala ito.
Meron.
No. In the version that we're holding, it's not
Yes,
here.
Mr. President, I
Ah.
think it's page 8B.
8C dito.
Sa copy ho namin 8B.
Okay, 8B.
B.
Wala nga 8B eh.
I understand, Mr. President.
B,
There's a
okay.
missing page 8B. Opo.
Yes.
Opo.
That's the reason that the secretariat and the presiding officer is having a hard time because that is
Yes, Mr.
8B,
President.
8B.
There's a missing page 8B.
There's no missing, I think, after 8A, nagpunta na sa 8C. Okay.
Ayun na nga po, Mr. President.
Kasi nga, yung pinadala sa inyo kanina pa umaga, pero the here in the plenary is the latest one, which is the corrected. That's
We'll
all.
just find the...
Yes, Mr.
Pero
President.
they resent it to you also. They resent it to you. So, you must
I apologize, Mr. President. We didn't receive it.
Mine is
Apo.
8C. Okay.
Oh, sige.
Can you...
So, shall I reintroduce
accept
that,
the
Mr.
amendment?
President?
Are you accepting the amendment?
I accept.
Thank you,
Any
good
objection?
sponsor.
Adopted.
Thank you, Mr. President.
All right, that was 8B. Now 8C.
Mr. President, there's a typo that I just want to point out.
Senator Hontiveros is like, Cayetano.
Senator Cayetano, yes, Mr. President. On my 8C, which is your 8B, it's letter F, page line 10 PP, organizing instead of organizing.
Yes, organizing.
Yeah, or without R.
Correct.
That's all, Mr. President.
Typo error,
Okay.
organizing and empowerment. Correct. It's now corrected. Thank you. Page 8C. Page 9.
I have 8D, page 8D. I have an amendment in page 8D.
8D.
Maybe 8C in your copy.
Maybe 8C in our copy. Sige, proceed. We'll
Yeah.
listen to it.
Baka ADHD yan, Mr. President.
On page 8D, lines 11, 13, the sentence was inadvertently deleted. With the permission of the President, may I request this sentence be retained. Within 120 days from the effectivity of this act, the plan shall be submitted by the PCA to the President for approval.
Okay. So
We're returning it. Okay.
we're replacing it in the number line 11 to line 13.
Yes, we're
We are reinstating it, in other words.
reinstating it. Yes.
Okay, so yes, it is an 8C in our copy. Any objection? Hearing none, adopted. Now, page 9. Amendment on page 9. Page 10. Any amendments on page 10?
Mr. President,
Senator Paul is recognized.
yes, I would like to propose an amendment to the good sponsor. On page 10, section 5, line 17, after the word registry, insert the phrase, own not more than 5 hectares of coconut farm in the last 10 years.
I accept, Mr. President.
Thank you. Good.
Accepting. Any objection? Adopted.
Thank you, Mr. President, and to the good sponsor. That's
Anything
it.
else on page 10? Go to page 11. Page 11. Any amendments on
Mr.
page 11?
President.
Senator
Mr. President.
Tiveros, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President. A good sponsor on page 11, line 3. After the phrase island grouping, I propose to insert the line provided further that at least one seat shall be reserved for a representative of small coconut farmer organizations. I so move, good sponsor.
Can I clarify that to what,
Yes,
to
good
what,
sponsor.
the management team or the PCA board? Management team.
To the PCA board, good sponsor.
No, it's, they have 3 already.
Yes, good sponsor. And further
What page is
reserving, good sponsor,
What page is that?
page 11, line 3.
Line
Opo,
3, after grouping.
after the phrase island grouping.
Okay.
So,
Can you read your ano?
yes, good sponsor. I propose after the phrase island grouping to insert the line, provided further that at least one seat shall be reserved for a representative of small coconut farmer organizations.
But the representative now are small. It's provided by the law that they are small farmers. They cannot own more than 5 hectares for the last 10 years. That was the insertion of, that was the amendment of Senator Poe. So all these 3 would be small farmers.
Hearing that from the good sponsor, then I submit good sponsor. Thank you, Mr. President.
So there's no more amendment. No more amendment.
Yes, Mr. Good sponsor, Mr. President.
They are all small farmers.
All right, we move to page 12. Any amendments on page 12? Page 13? Any amendments on page 13? Page 14? Amendments on
Page 14. Okay.
Senator Villar is recognized.
Okay. On page 14, line 15, before the period and after the words assets, insert the following. All COCO levy assets in the name of the Philippine government shall be sold within the period of 5 years after the effectivity of this act, and the proceeds shall be transferred to trust fund for the benefit of the coconut farmers. We're putting a deadline on the sale of the
14A
assets.
in our copy, in plenary copy. 14A. All right, any objection? Hearing none, adopted. Any amendments on 14A? We go to 15. Amendments of 15. 15A. No amendments. 16. Page 16. No amendments on page 16. We move to 16A. No amendments to 16A. We go to page 17. 17. No amendments on 17. Page 18. No amendments on page 18. We go to page 19.
Mr. President, I have an amendment on page 19.
Yes, Senator Villar is recognized.
On page 19, line 20, after the word directly, insert the phrase to the implementing government agencies and delete the phrase for the implementation of the project as instructed by the PCA.
All right. Replace that with any amendment, any objection? Any not adopted? Any amendment on 19? We go to page 20. Amendments on page 20. No amendments, page 21.
Mr. President, I have an amendment on page 21.
Proceed.
Line 4. After the word law and before the period, insert the phrase within the period of 5 years from the effectivity of this act. So, I so move.
Any objection? Hearing none, adopted. Any other amendment on page 21? Page 22. Amendments on page 22. We move to page 23. Amendments on page 23. Page 24. Any amendments on page 24? No amendments. 24A. 25. Page 25. No amendments on page 25. Page 26. No amendments on page 26. Majority Leader, we're done.
Can I check page, Mr. President, page 15, line 8 for a while?
Page 15.
Line 8.
Line 8.
Is the word pending the accrual or availability of the trust fund income has been removed.
No,
Yes,
no, it
What?
is here.
It's still there.
Yes, it is there. It is here.
Page 15,
15, line E.
line
Line
8.
8. Pending the accrual or availability of the trust fund income, comma.
Can we remove that, Mr. President?
You want it removed?
Yes, because we don't want to be burdened by that because the trust fund has enough money.
Not allowed to be funded out of the trust fund and subject to annual government. All right, your motion is to remove line 8. Therefore, we must remove the comma after fund
Yeah.
on line 7. Any objection? Hearing none, adopted.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Majority Leader, there is a member of the Senate who wishes individual amendments, but not today, tomorrow. So perhaps another clean copy?
Yes, Mr. President, we move to ask the Secretariat to come up with the clean copies of all the amendments today so that we can study them and for our colleagues to give further perfecting or new amendments tomorrow.
All right.
Mr.
So the
President.
Secretariat is directed to Senator
Mr. President, may I ask a question? I think we're going we have a interpolation for create. Do we have time for the amendment before the interpolation for create tomorrow?
Mr. President, I can commit that we can take that first hour
Yes.
and then move for its approval on second reading, and then we can take up create right after.
Okay, thank you very
Yes,
much.
because tomorrow there is we need not go into a page by page because it's only one more senator who's involved in the individual amendments, unless
Okay, Mr. President.
someone changes their mind and comes up with another one. But right now, it looks like it will not be very long. So, all right, Majority Leader.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I agree, and we commit to the distinguished chairperson, Chairman Cynthia Villar, that we will take it up first hour and hopefully approve it by second reading. After that, we can take up the create measure.
All right.
Thank you, Mr. President. So,
Directed to give the members of the Senate a clean copy of as of September 22, 2020 by tomorrow morning.
Mr. President.
That's correct, Mr. President. Mr. President, may we recognize Senator Kiko Pangilinan, Mr. President.
Lina is recognized.
If it could be earlier, Mr. President, even by email, we would appreciate it because we are scheduled to meet tomorrow morning. If we can have it.
So there is a request by the Senator Pangilinan that he be given a copy tonight.
Yes, even by email, Mr. President, even by electronic means.
Yes, by email later after the session.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. President. With that, I move to suspend consideration of Senate Bill number 1396. I so move.
Any objection? Hearing none, consideration is suspended.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I move that we resume consideration of Senate Bill number 1513 under Committee Report number 84. This is the labor education into social science subjects in tertiary education curriculums. I so move.
Any objection? Hearing none, consideration is in order.
Mr. President, we recognize the distinguished chairperson of the Committee on Labor as well as the Committee on Higher Education, Senator Joel Villanueva, and to interpolate our distinguished minority floor leader, Senator Franklin M. Drilon.
The best Joel, Senator Villanueva, is recognized to sponsor the measure and to interpolate the minority leader, Senator Frank Drilon.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. Majority Floor Leader. And let me take this opportunity again, Mr. President, to greet you and Tita Helen a happy, victorious 51st anniversary. Thank you. And we are ready now, Mr. President, for the questions
Thank you. Go ahead.
From our distinguished Minority Floor Leader.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Mr. President, will the gentleman yield the floor to a few questions on this measure?
Gladly, Mr. President, especially coming from our distinguished Minority Floor Leader.
Mr. President, for the record, let me extend my congratulations to the sponsor for crafting this measure and presenting it to the Senate for approval. The records will show that Senator Villanueva has sponsored a number of measures to enhance workers' rights, particularly in this Congress. It is commendable indeed that once more our good sponsor comes up with another feather in his cap, so to speak, by sponsoring this measure. The objectives are very noble. We clearly recognize that, Mr. President. We will raise, however, in this interpellation period, questions on whether or not the objectives of the bill are realistic, given the situation that we have, and the issue on academic freedom as to whether this would infringe on the academic freedom of our education sector. So my first question, Mr. President, is can the good sponsor spread into the record the objectives of this measure?
Yes, Mr. President. Thank you for this question, Mr. President, distinguished colleague, our minority floor leader. The reasons why we filed this measure and now we are sponsoring is the fact that labor rights and standards violations remain to be a problem in this country. We also wanted to address the cost of labor dispute, which affects both the employers and the workers and the government. Labor disputes should be minimized to avoid the high cost of litigations. Another reason is for higher education students, which we considered among our future workers and employers. However, Mr. President, distinguished colleague, there is no course subject for the meantime currently in the higher education curriculum that comprehensively covers labor education. This bill levels up the DOLE labor education for graduating students o yung LEGS program into a labor education program that is taught in the classroom setting and is offered to all higher education institution students and not just graduating students for those where DOLE choose to conduct their labor education for graduating students program. In short, Mr. President, we wanted to inculcate the culture of compliance and respect among workers and employers. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yes, in short, the bill seeks, as the good sponsor said, to inculcate compliance with our labor laws, and make our students conscious of their labor rights and labor standards. Since, as the good sponsor said, the labor standards violation continue to be a problem. Mr. President, in relation to this objective, can the good sponsor spread into the record or advise the Senate as to what is or how big is our labor force today?
Right now, we have about 42 million employed Filipinos, Mr. President, as per provided by the Department of Labor and Employment. This is as of January of 2020 or the pre-COVID-19 pandemic, Mr. President.
32 million is the employed.
Mr. President, 42.
I'm asking for the for the labor force in our country first.
Labor force is 42 million, Mr. President.
That's better. 42 million.
That is employed Filipinos, Mr. President, already employed.
Okay. Already, is it 42 million employed? Is that correct? This
Yes, yes, Mr. President.
42 employed
We're
as
talking about employed. We're trying to get some more information as to the labor force, because what we are getting is 44 million employed Filipinos. So the labor force would be somehow roughly about 45, 47 million, Mr. President.
no. Can we have a more accurate data, because I am leading to a point that I want to spread into the record.
I understand, Mr. President. Thank you, but unfortunately, we don't have the Dole representatives here, and we're calling them, Mr. President. But later, Mr. President, if
All right.
audience of our minority leader, we will give him the exact figures.
Just recalling, although I must admit, I'm not confident about the accuracy, but in the recent publications, I recall that the government was saying that as of July, there were something like 10.5 or 10.5% unemployed, equal to about 7.5 million workers. Is that a correct recollection?
Well, according to Dole, Mr. President, we were given 4.6 million unemployed as of July of 2020, Mr. President.
And 4.6 million as unemployed as of
July 2020, Mr. President.
2020. So if would you have a number on the underemployed?
Underemployed. As of July of 2020, there's about 7.1 million workers underemployed, Mr. President. I'm sorry, underemployed, Mr. President. Meaning they can still work for more, Mr. President.
Yeah. In fact, if I recall the definitions, when you say underemployed, included in this figure would be those who work for only one hour during the week. They're already considered as underemployed, but not unemployed. Is that correct,
Yes.
sir?
Correct. You are correct, Mr. President. Meaning they can work for more, or they are only working for an hour or two, Mr. President. They're considered underemployed, Mr. President.
I would like to think this good sponsor will agree with me that these 7.1 million Filipinos are practically unemployed, because you could not possibly earn enough if you will work only for 1 hour a week. That is why you still look for another job. Would the good sponsor agree with me on that?
I wanted to agree with you, Mr. President, Mr. Minority Floor Leader, but I was given the go signal by the Department of Labor and Employment that they are somehow employed because they are already working. They are somehow getting their salaries, but they are still looking for the right job. They are also looking, some of them who are in part-time job would be looking for a regular time or 8-hour job, Mr. President.
Yeah. Well, Mr. President, I think you can double check the data, but the 7.1% underemployed and are in the informal sector. They are not salaried in any case. So it is quite correct that we are in a labor surplus economy. Is that correct, sir?
No, the question is, are we? We agree, Mr. President. The minority floor leader is correct.
So, if we agree that we are today operating on a labor surplus economy, it means that jobs are quite difficult. And in fact, today we see unemployment rate going up, especially because of the pandemic. And therefore, it is extremely difficult for our employees, for workers, to assert what otherwise would be their rights under the labor code. Unfortunate as it is, could that be a realistic assessment of the situation?
I agree, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, that distinguished minority floor leader. That's why we feel that we don't just talk about the rights of the workers, but also talk about their responsibilities, Mr. President. The goal of this measure is to lower labor disputes, Mr. President, so that if the workers are aware of their responsibilities and their rights, the more that they would know their responsibility, the more that they would have to comply, Mr. President, with what is expected of them, Mr. President.
Well, that's a very good in theory, Mr. Chair. We know that. But as a realistic proposition, that does not happen in the workplace. Ika nga dahil sa kakulangan ng trabaho, kakulangan ng kita, kadalasan ang ating mga gagawa ay kumakapit sa patalim kahit na papano lang basta kumita at may trabaho. That is why I am raising these issues, because I do not feel that the objectives of the measure is realistic, given the condition of our economy, where we have millions of unemployed, millions of unemployed, and more often than not, the reality in the ground is that the workers, our workers, would struggle to keep their jobs. That is how I view this, Mr. President. Because to me, the best protection is not only a strong laws, strong implementation, but also a good economy where workers would be very productive, and therefore the unemployment would reach desirable levels. That it is not easy to just to let go of workers because of the lack of available manpower. In any case, I just want to spread that on the record.
Yes, Mr. President, if I may, just a quick rebuttal, Mr. President. I think the issues made by the distinguished minority floor leader is valid. And again, the point that we would like to raise is that the integration of labor education in HEIs and even in tech box sector would greatly help our workers, Mr. President, na magkaroon sila ng pananaw at malinaw na understanding ano ba talaga yung kanilang mga responsibilities, ano ba yung kanilang mga karapatan. Kasi po, marami po sa ating mga workers ang naabuso sapagkat kung titignan po natin yung current situation natin, pagka-graduate po ang isang estudyante, doon lamang po sila nakakarinig kung ano ba talaga yung working conditions, ano ba itong OSH, yung Occupational Safety and Health Standards. Kung sakali po na mabibigyan ng pagkakataon ang panukalang batas na ito ay may integrate sa ating higher education curriculum sa general subjects na hindi naman po babaguhin yung curriculum. Ito po ay may integrate lamang nang sa ganoon sila po ay magkaroon ng kaalaman, yung basic knowledge ng, again, hindi lang po yung kanilang karapatan, kundi yung kanila pong mga responsibilidad. And we feel na kung mangyayari po ito, Mr. President, mas hindi maaabuso yung ating mga manggagawa. Hindi po sila basta masasama dun sa mga patibong ng mga labor unions na mali pala yung pinaglalaban o hindi pala makatarungan kung sila po ay mayroong kaalaman. So ilang laman po ito dun sa ating mga nais ma-attain at we feel that it is important na somehow magkaroon ng integration ng labor education program para po sa ating mga future workers and employers.
Yeah. That integration is found in Section 4 of the bill. It's entitled Integration of Labor Education in Higher Education Curriculum. Is that a correct reading of the bill, Mr. President?
Nasaan page? Yes, Mr. President, the integration of labor education in higher education. Yes, Mr. President, you're correct.
Under that provision, all public and private higher education institutions are mandated to. And then there is an enumeration of the subjects that should be included in the core GE subject or understanding the self. Is that how it will work, Mr. President, once this becomes a law?
Yes, Mr. President, if I may, there are about 8 general education core subjects. Ito po yung minimum standards ng CHED. And we are looking at among the 8 core subjects, Mr. President, and if I may, yan po yung understanding the self, readings in Philippine history, the contemporary world, mathematics in the modern world, purposive communication, art appreciation, science, technology, and society, at yung panghuli po yung ethics, no? Ito po ay 36 units required ng CHED as a general education. Sa bawat subjects po na ito, 3 units po. So sa 3 units po, 51 hours po yan. So we're looking about 620 hours dun po sa 8 subject na yon, and we're looking at 4, at least 4, but we are amenable, Mr. President, if the distinguished minority leader would introduce some amendments. Ang nakikita po kasi namin yung sa 4 na core courses, like yung understanding the self, readings in Philippine history, the contemporary world, tsaka po yung ethics, dun po pwede na ma-integrate ito pong mga topics on labor education. Yun po yung ating ipinopropose dito sa panukalang batas na ito, Mr. President.
Mr. President, the subjects on labor is quite comprehensive. Would you agree with me on that, Mr. President? Mr. President, and this is because of the desire of the good sponsor to integrate the labor education to our students, Mr. President.
Yes, I agree, Mr. President. We agree with the statements made by the minority floor leader.
Mr. President, you know, in law school, labor and social legislation by itself would constitute 6 units during my time. That means 3 hours a week for a year, for 12 months, because 2 semesters. Not only that, Mr. President, all these subjects enumerated in Section 4A of the measure are bar subjects, and this is one complete bar examination by itself. Are we saying that all of this will be integrated in the core general education subjects? That is what I'm saying, Mr. President. How realistic is this objective? Isasaksak po lahat na itong subject na ito. Nasa College of Law, 6 full units, 3 times a week for 1 year, 12 months, for 12 months. And in the bar exams, this is one Sunday afternoon, the first Sunday, if I recall correctly. So this is quite a menu that you would want to include into the core general education subject, understanding the self. Baka po naman masyadong malaki itong ang menu na ating ilalagay sa ating curriculum.
Well, Mr. President, we understand where the distinguished minority leaders is coming from. Unlike po doon sa sa law school, Mr. President, where you talk more of labor cases, this is more of talking and discussing existing standards. Mr. President, presently, ang nagagawa lang po ng DOLE natin after graduation, meron lamang pong seminar that lasts for about 2-3 hours at sama-sama na po lahat. Yun po yung nangyayari. Pangalawa po, if you look at if you ask me, does DOLE have an information on the labor rights literacy among Filipinos? Noong hearing po, ang sagot nila, wala. In fact, DOLE has no existing study on the contemporary, on the competency or knowledge of Filipinos on labor rights. However, Mr. President, in its DOLE Labor and Employment Education Services e-learning portal includes quizzes that gauge participants' knowledge on specific topics. And in such quizzes, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, participants have recorded unsatisfactory scores. Halos bagsak po lahat. Labor standards, working conditions and rest periods, wage and benefits, safety and health standards, 73%. Labor relations, at least yun ang pinakamataas po, 80% naman. Dispute management, contracting or subcontracting agreements, 74%. And I can go on and on. And that's why we feel, Mr. President, that it's important na makasama po dun sa general education core subjects itong integration of labor education.
I can understand the position taken by the good sponsor in defense of his bill. But I do hope that the good sponsor can open his mind to the fact that the enumeration here of all the laws that the student will be bombarded with on labor laws would require, I will repeat, 6 units in law school. 3 units, meaning once a week, 3 times a week for 1 semester, and another 3 units for labor relations 3 times a week for the other half of the year. So what I hope that the good gentleman will realize that to bombard the student with even beyond the law, if I may read, the role and contribution of labor to the national economy. This is not even taught in law school. National and global issues related to labor and employment, such as not limited to labor migration and overseas work. This is not even part of the 6 units that we have enumerated. Minimum labor standards on wage, overtime pay, night differential pay, holiday pay, leaves, basic income taxation in the country. In the core, G is subject the contemporary world, which covers globalization and its impact on individuals, communities, and nations, comma, challenges and responses, semicolon. Third, the history of the Filipino worker struggle, which includes foundation of the National Labor Holiday, celebrated the first day of May, and the history of major labor policies in the Philippines. This is a whole subject which may require a master's thesis. And then number 4, labor relations, dispute management, labor organizations, and political participation. So what I'm just saying, Mr. President, if you look at this, it is really impractical. It's really the reality of this being absorbed by our students is something that I cannot accept as realistic. But again, I am pointing that out so that we hope that the good sponsor can review what he is suggesting in his measure. Mr. President, that's all. That's what we're saying. Having said that, Mr. President,
If I may, thank you, Mr. President, and we appreciate the wisdom of our minority floor leader. Again, we wanted to spread into the records the importance of having a basic knowledge, and that's what we are shooting for. If the distinguished minority floor leader would help us amending this particular provision of the bill, we would gladly accept his amendments. But let me just also point out, Mr. President, that the original proposal was then was to concentrate or integrate labor education into one subject. But during the hearing, Mr. President, it came out that to avoid congestion of one subject, because on average, a subject with 3 credit units covers 51 hours of class discussion, integrating all the components of labor education into multiple subjects prevents overcrowding of a single subject. Another is to deliver labor education through a multidisciplinary approach para ho iba-iba, hindi lang po sa isang subject o isang beses lang nila narinig yung kanilang mga responsibilities and rights as a worker, as an employee or as an employer, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. President.
Yes. Well, I am submitting this for the consideration of the good sponsors because I think he will accept it is undeniable that this enumeration in law school would require 1 year on its own, not even a part of another of a general course. And I can imagine that all the other subjects in the general education core general education would be eased out if you're going to go through all of these provisions. Requirements on the integration of labor education. I am just pointing that out that to be the good sponsor in terms of how realistic is this proposition. And,
Thank you,
and also, you even integrate labor education in the technical and vocational education and training curriculum, or TVET. Again, you go on labor rights and workers' welfare, role and contribution of labor to the national economy, basic income taxation. Basic income taxation. This is not easy. Minimum wage, labor standards on wage, overtime, night shift differential, holiday pay, leaves, etc. National and global situation and challenges, labor organization and political participation. My point, Mr. President, if we are going to follow this law as proposed, it will ease out other equally important subjects unnecessarily. So I am submitting that for the consideration of the good sponsor, if he wants to make the objectives realistic.
Yes, Mr. President. Thank you for reminding us, Mr. President. Definitely, the intention is not to touch the basic education curriculum, whether you talk about TVET or technical vocational education and training, or the higher education institutions general education program. We would be we would be very open, Mr. President, to any amendments or to clear this particular provision so as not to congest our students who become future workers and employers of this nation. Thank you.
If the committee is convinced on the validity of the points that we have raised in this period, the committee should be able to come up with the provision which is consistent with its objective, rather than this representation suggesting the amendment, as we are not so familiar with the overall objective of this measure, and we may be suggesting amendments which are not acceptable to the good sponsor. Maybe, if I may suggest, if the good sponsor recognizes the validity of the points we raised, we can be honored with proposed amendments to the measure at the appropriate time. But anyway, Mr. President, my next question is,
Let me say for the record, Mr. President, that we will do that. And perhaps it's also important to spread into the records that if you look at the training regulations of TESDA, some labor education programs are already embedded in the not core competencies, basic competencies, Mr. President. So with that, mas madali ho yung sa TechVoc. Thank you, Mr. President.
yes, Mr. President, yes, I am not fully familiar with the other jurisdictions, but would a good sponsor be able to tell this representation and the body which other country would have this kind of a system?
Well, we were told, Mr. President, it's being done with developed countries, and we will give you a copy, Mr. President, because right now we don't have it. It's not available, but we'll let you know, Mr. President. Unfortunately, we don't have any representative of DOLE with us, Mr. President.
Well, may we request, because Mr. President, this is something
Yes, we agree.
at least to this representation. That is why I'm asking if other countries have similar systems. And you mentioned developed countries. We would like to see how they have structured their educational system and how successful are they in making our working force conscious of their rights under the law and the effect of that on better compliance with the law. In other words, this inclusion in the curriculum in this detail has resulted in a better environment of compliance. So we would like to be I would like the sponsor to share with us the experience in other countries so that we can at least be comfortable that indeed this has worked in other jurisdictions and hopefully it can work with us here. Yes, we understand that you may need the guidance of the Department of Labor, and therefore maybe we can at this point suspend our interpellation and await the presence of our resource persons so that we can have more the answers on the record for future reference. So with that, Mr. President, may we move to suspend our interpellation and resume it on another date when the Department of Labor officials are present.
All right, what does the majority leader say?
First of all, Mr. President, we will comply with the requests by our minority floor leader. If you would recall yesterday when we were having a session, I actually raised this particular measure, whether or not we will be tackling this, and therefore we didn't get much enough preparation to make sure that the resource persons from DOLE and CHED will be joining us. But we will comply, Mr. President. And thank you, Mr. Minority Floor Leader. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Majority leader?
Mr. President, Senator Pia would like to be recognized, Mr. President. Senator Pia Cayetano.
Thank you, Mr. President. I actually made a reservation to interpellate. Is the sponsor willing for me to interpellate today?
Gladly, Mr. President. Sure.
Okay.
With the concurrence of the
presiding officer, of course.
Yes, you proceed.
Thank you. Following the minority floor leader's interpellation, this will probably be shorter than I had planned, because he raised some of the concerns I also have. I'd like to start by sharing with all of you some learnings I also came across in my committee, the committee I chair, the Committee on Sustainable Development Goals, Innovation, and Futures Thinking. So in our Future of Education hearings, one of the things that struck me is that the future, these people who specialize in the future of education told us that one of the problems we face in our country and many countries all over the world, most countries in fact, is that we are teaching our children 20th century skills. So our world is moving into the 21st century. We are in the 21st century. The technology and direction of the workforce should be geared towards the 21st century. And yet the skills we are teaching them is in the 20th century. And I can explain this very briefly as follows. At the turn of the century, 1900s, what was being taught is things that if you are rich enough to have an encyclopedia, or if you have access to a library, you will research it. Otherwise, a teacher is just giving you information, because information was not readily available. But in this century, information is readily available. So what we should be teaching the children or the youth is how to use this information. And that struck me because I recognize that is a problem that we face along with other countries. We are still teaching them information that is readily available. What they need to know is how to dissect that information, what to do with that information, how to decide what information is valid and what information is valid, and so on and so forth. And so the next part of that hearing, Mr. President, was, so then what? What exactly are these skills that you need to teach the youth? And these skills are known as the 4 C's: critical thinking, communication, collaboration, and creativity. So on that note, I'd like to start posing my questions given that brief background. Would the sponsor care to share his thoughts on those 4 C's, no? Critical thinking, communication, collaboration, and creativity? Would he agree that these are very specific skill sets that the youth of our future should have?
Yes, definitely, Mr. President. I agree with the distinguished lady from Taguig. Critical thinking, collaboration, communication, very, very important or essential
skills.
skill sets na kailangan malaman or matutunan ng isang future worker or future employer, Mr. President. I agree, Mr. President.
Yes, I agree too, and I'm glad that the gentleman agrees, because he's also the chair of the Committee on Higher Education. So it is I'm pleased that he agrees with that, because this is something that I feel should be non-negotiable, no, in the skills that we want our young people to have. And I'd like to share also that a few years ago, I was good friends with an American expat. He was the president of a multinational company here. He's no longer in the Philippines, pero mahal na mahal niyang Pilipinas. He taught in UP, he taught in Ateneo, and he and his wife even adopted a Filipino child. So ganun yung passion niya sa Filipino. And he told me that in all his and as I said, he worked for a multinational based in the Philippines. He had worked for this multinational, I think, for 30 years, and then he became the president of the Philippines. And I asked him, what can you say about the Filipino workforce? What are your, what are the positive and what are the critiques that you have? And basically he said to me, I love working with Filipinos. They're passionate about their work. They're loyal. They're friendly. They're accommodating. They know how to collaborate with one another. But one thing I feel they're lacking is leadership skills. That's why all over the world, and as I said, no, he's with a multinational. He noticed that a lot of Filipinos excel in managerial skills, low level until managerial skills. But few of them go up to those leadership roles, those CEO positions internationally. And he feels like this is where I feel they were not taught well enough. No, I mean, they have it in them, but they were not taught those leadership skills. And that's why this gentleman ended up teaching leadership in UP and Ateneo, because he felt that was the skill that the Filipinos are lacking. I'm just curious if his honor has any thoughts on that. No, I mean, whatever it is, I'm just curious because I was fascinated by that point of view that this gentleman shared with me.
I agree, Mr. President. I agree, but I also would like to point out perhaps that it is important to know that before you become a leader, you would have to be informed very well, and that you have the right information with you. As mentioned a while ago, Mr. President, a lot of our problems in the labor sector arises when a particular worker is not aware of his rights or his responsibilities, Mr. President. Tapos alam naman natin, madami dun sa workplace area ang magbubuyo or kunyari magrereklamo, magpa-file ng complaint, pero hindi pala tama yung pagkakaintindi niya doon sa kanyang karapatan o doon sa kanyang dapat ay ginagampanan bilang isang empleyado.
So His Honor is concerned that the future employee wouldn't understand his rights, or the employer? I wasn't so
Both, Mr. President, both. That's what we wanted to accomplish, not for the future employees of this nation, but also for the future employers, Mr. President.
Thank you. But would His Honor, and I agree, both sets should know. Both sets should know. Ang hirap naman. That's why when I talk about information or education, it should go both ways. But I guess then to put my question, to phrase it another way, would His Honor also recognize though that possibly one angle we can have in educating our people is to also have that leadership mind skill, that I can do this mind skill. To even broaden that picture, that entrepreneurial mind skill, and hindi lang yung trabahador ako, susunod lang ako. Tama po ba yun?
Definitely, Mr. President, I certainly agree with the statements made by our distinguished colleague from Taguig. It is important, definitely. Leadership is everything, I think, Mr. President. And we should teach our young people, especially, that it is important that they become leaders themselves.
Thank you. Mr. President, I'd like to know if I was listening intently on the interpellation of the minority floor leader. Would the gentleman, the sponsor, also know what kind of IT or digital skills are being taught, if any, in the 36 units of core subjects? Digital skills or
Actually, it's in another measure that I will be sponsoring, Mr. President, distinguished colleague. But right now, I don't have some of the data. But we'll let you know. We'll coordinate with your office, Mr. President, as soon as we get that data, Mr. President. When you talk about digital skills, being taught, Mr. President.
Anyway, I would like to share also with you some data that I have. Again, this is information I gathered in our hearings. The World Economic Forum tells us that in the year 2030, 9 out of 10 jobs will be maybe not obsolete, no, but would require very technical skills. 9 out of 10. So the question then that the next question you ask is, wow, does that mean 9 out of 10 current employees will lose their jobs? Well, not quite, because they say that only 5% would definitely be losing their jobs. The others can retain their jobs if they will have the ability to upskill themselves. So if they can have the skills necessary to ride the wave of the increase in technological use, the use of IT and digital skills, then they will still continue to have their job. Does that sound? Is that something that resonates with the good sponsor? Does that sound right?
Mr. President, it's been our advocacy to promote upskilling and yung connection po dun sa lifelong learning, Mr. President. I think is very important.
I like. Yes, go ahead. Sorry.
The distinguished lady from Taguig would agree with this representation. Yeah.
In fact, I like that phrase, lifelong learning. In my presentations, again, based on the learnings from my hearing, when they ask, well, who will survive in the next 20 to 30 years? It's not somebody who's the smartest, but somebody who can adapt. You survive if you can adapt. And how do you adapt? You adapt if you can continue, if you can accept that your life will be about upskilling. If your attitude is, I learned this one skill, maybe once more in midlife, I'll learn another skill, okay na yon, you will not survive. Does His Honor agree with that?
I definitely agree, Mr. President. Thank you for pointing that out. And I think every education measure that we will pass in this Congress should adhere to that principle, Mr. President, distinguished colleague.
Yes, and that's why, Mr. President, I asked that question about how many of the GE subjects would be teaching that, because apparently there will be such a big demand, the need to continually upskill oneself, no? To continually, not just once, not just twice, but to continually upskill. And so what needs to be taught, and this is my question for the gentleman, does he agree that what needs to be taught to the students, to the future workforce, is that perseverance, that ability to understand that my life is going to be about change. I can persevere. I can outmaneuver myself in this possible situation. I will adapt. Those are the skills that need to be learned. And how? Well, I'll go to my next question. Does His Honor agree that those are the very skills that need to be learned?
Yes, Mr. President, agree. And that's why we made mention a while ago that the academic freedom, the flexibility of the CHED and the higher education institutions, even tech book institutions, would not be hampered by this particular measure. In fact, this will complement their objective in ensuring that our graduates would have a better understanding of labor education.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to ask His Honor if he's come across this. It's a Supreme Court case that establishes the essential freedoms of universities: who may teach, who may be taught, how it shall be taught, and who may be admitted to study. So I'd like to zone in on on how it shall be taught and what may be taught. What is His Honor's understanding of this provision vis-a-vis the bill that he would like to, the bill that he is proposing?
I would confess to Your Honor that I haven't read that Supreme Court decision that she was talking about. But during the hearing, we asked point blank our resource persons from the Commission on Higher Education and the Department of Labor and Employment about this particular provision, and they both agree that it is important and it is implementable, and that DOLE would have the modules and the CHED would have the opportunity to integrate this particular labor education topics in the general education subjects, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues.
Thank you, Mr. President. I actually am just sharing. I just came across this Supreme Court decision in the context of studying your measure, Mr. President. And after enumerating those four essential freedoms, and again I repeat that the two that I'm focusing on is what may be taught and how it shall be taught, the Supreme Court goes on to say educational institutions should be allowed to decide its aims and objective and to determine how best to attain them, free from outside coercion or interference from the government, except when there is an overriding public welfare which would call for some restraint. The case is First Class Cadet Padilla versus Superintendent of PMP, GR number 211362, February 24, 2015. So I think it's very clear. I don't need to repeat it. I'll use that as a basis for my next question. Given that the Supreme Court has said that educational institutions should be allowed to decide its aims and objectives and to determine how best to attain them, free from outside coercion and interference, I gather that His Honor's objective in spreading out the labor education subjects is precisely to give the universities, the colleges, the option to choose it within the to teach it within the subject matters. Is that His Honor's objective? Because I was listening to your the interpellation of the sponsor with the Minority Floor Leader.
to be integrated. Yes, you're correct now, distinguished colleague, to be integrated in the general education subjects, Mr. President. We are looking at, in the proposal, the 8 core subjects, Mr. President, we're looking at 4 core subjects where we can integrate these particular topics, Mr. President. But again, let me spread into the records that we will continue to submit to what the distinguished lady from Taguig mentioned about the academic freedom and how and the rights of our HEIs in teaching and implementing the curriculums being implemented by and overseen by our Commission on Higher Education, Mr. President.
Thank you for that, Mr. President. At this point, I would like to maybe paint a scenario and ask for His Honor's comments on it. Now, given that the 4 skills, the 4 C's that I mentioned are critical thinking, communication, collaboration, and creativity. Perhaps we can say one of the difficulties we have with current labor, one of the reasons we have labor relations issues is could be an issue of communications. Would that not be correct? Would that not be a possibility?
Yes, Mr. President, you're correct.
Lack of communication or lack of knowledge that these are their rights kasi hindi na communicate ng maayos or may nagko-communicate. I think you alluded to that, may nagko-communicate pero mali naman yung kino-communicate, di ba?
Exactly.
Yes. And so in that case, Mr. President, that's where critical thinking comes in. Somebody may have communicated something with these young workers, and yet without that ability to make use of critical thinking skills, they just take it for what it is. It goes back to the 20th century education. Binigay yung information, hindi man lang finilter, hindi man lang sinala. They don't use critical thinking skills to make the best out of that information or even challenge it if it is wrong. Would His Honor agree?
Yes, agree, definitely, Mr. President.
And then, Mr. President, I would like to know His Honor's view on when I went to law school in the late 80s, meron pa rin pero baka medyo patapos na yung heights ng mga labor the big labor strikes where many multinationals even had to close down because of these strikes that lasted for months and eventually these companies closed down. So medyo yun yung environment na familiar ako because those cases that we studied in labor law were still very fresh because obviously it takes years for these cases to go to the Supreme Court and for the Supreme Court to make a decision. And I'd like to think, Mr. President, I don't know if I'm correct, I have no basis really, to think that with more collaboration skills, and that's one of the 4 C's, a lot of these conflicts could have been avoided. What does His Honor say about this?
I'm sorry, I didn't get the question.
My question is, Mr. President, I gave the backdrop of when I was in law school. Ang dami naming kasong pinag-aaralan about labor issues precisely as I think you want to address. And what I'm putting forth now is that one of the 4 C's is collaboration. And so if we had improved critical thinking, communication, and the other C is creativity, don't you think this collaboration skill could have been put to good use and perhaps avoid a lot of these conflicts?
Definitely, Mr. President, agree. If you have the right information and naging maayos yung pag-aaral mo tungkol sa mga usapin na ito, as mentioned a while ago, Mr. President, ang pagkakaroon ng miscommunication o pagtutunggali between workers and employers ay very costly, not only to the workers and employers but also to the government. And that's why we envision that this bill would be able to help in tempering, Mr. President, yung pong mga ganitong scenario, yung mga ganitong nangyayari. Again, it is important to note that we are not only strengthening the rights of the future workers, but also the responsibility of these future workers and the responsibility of future employers. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I want to bring up another, let me just check my notes. I wanted to bring up the issue on what's it? Perhaps the minority floor leader can help me out with the right labor terms. When you sit across each other on a table versus going to court, no, you're addressing your conflict through.
Conciliation.
There you go, conciliation. So, Mr. President, what I'm trying to say with the help of the minority floor leader is that it appears to me that in the early days there was so much antagonistic the approach, no, to conflict resolution was very antagonistic in nature, no. I mean, literally nagbobombahan, nagbabatuhan, and then they'll file cases against each other and so forth and so on. And yet today, you see a lot of these approaches to be more conciliatory in nature, to sit across the table and to try to find solutions to that. And that took time, no? That took a lot of years of, I don't know, maturity on the part of the human species. I don't know. But would His Honor agree that these are skills that also need to be learned so that those in the workforce and those in management can come together and find that happy place for everyone?
Yes, definitely, Mr. President, distinguished colleague, I agree with you. And this is also the intention of this measure to institutionalize that, Mr. President, distinguished colleague.
Okay, so let me now then, I will be wrapping up in a minute or two. I'll go directly to the bill, section 4, no, where the bill speaks of the this is a mandatory provision for public and private higher educations to provide certain subjects. Would His Honor, after my interpellation and the interpellation of the minority floor leader, would His Honor be open to considering giving more flexibility to the higher education institutes by way of allowing them to explore these subject matters through critical thinking, communication, collaboration, creativity? And let me give His Honor an example. For example, my kids were brought up in a very progressive school, no, Montessori. And I had a lot of hesitancy in putting them in a traditional school because I wanted them to be more progressive in the way they approach issues, not memorizing, not just copying things from the blackboard. And so I was pleasantly surprised that in what I thought was a traditional school, the kids were learning Greek mythology and the lessons that came out of Greek mythology by way of presenting these characters. They would dress up in costumes and then they would reenact this famous Greek mythology and then explain the lessons on their own. So that is really exemplifying the use of critical thinking, creativity, communication, and so on and so forth. Would His Honor be willing to allow these academic institutions to use these 4 C's in whatever way they deem fit, and teach these skills that His Honor is, or the lessons, the information that His Honor wants our youth of the future to have, whether they are leaders, they are the managers, or they are the employees? Would His Honor be open to not having to define those subjects in section 4, but instead just having it discussed in any manner they deem fit in relevant subjects, such that if the student was taking up management, or in my case, economics, taking up entrepreneurship or the like, then I would assume that these would be core subjects that they have to take. But if they are not, then the school would have the liberty to teach them in any way they deem fit. It could be integrated in communications class. I took a class in UP which was speech. You can talk about any topic you want. So if there is an understanding that leadership skills, management skills, the rights of laborers, the skills that a future member of the workforce should have, they can discuss that in a speech writing class. They can discuss that in mass communication, and in so on and so forth. So that's my question. Would His Honor be open to giving more flexibility to the HEIs in choosing how they approach these subject matters?
Thank you, Mr. President. That is the most ideal. But however, Mr. President, we feel that if we do it by HEIs or higher education institutions, Mr. President, baka kasi magkalat-kalat. So we wanted the CHED to identify what core general education subjects, the labor education topics will be integrated into. But that's just minimum, Mr. President. Yeah, hindi naman po nililimit yung HEIs to go further, and nothing prevents higher educational institutions to do more or cover more areas or emphasize more on the critical thinking and collaboration and communication, Mr. President. So I think, Mr. President, it is important that there's a standard, Mr. President, na set ng CHED na ito yung minimum standards na pwedeng gawin, and then the HEIs can add some more or have the flexibility also, Mr. President, to do what they want, how they want it, Mr. President.
Thank you for that response. On that note, Mr. President, I would be a bit concerned that we would be violating the academic freedom provision of the Constitution. In my bill, which is now a law, the reproductive health law, we would have also wanted to do the same, no? Because I am very passionate about the importance of responsible parenthood and responsible actions of each person on I mean, well, let's not go into that. I'm very passionate about it, and I would have wanted to, but I deemed it more responsible to just indicate in the bill, which is now a law, that it would be incorporated in essential subjects, Mr. Chair. Because like I said, you can limit it to health education, but it's even better that it is freely discussed in their communication classes, in their speech writing classes, and even in art. Even and more so in the sciences. So that is one concern I put forth, Mr. President, that there may be a violation. I read the Supreme Court ruling already on that, and I believe it is quite clear. But if we will just be guiding them and making known these concerns, then I don't think that there is any violation. But to really put it in the subjects, and that's why I also wanted to clarify, because I know His Honor was similarly guided that one subject would also not be advisable, because then you are loading, you would also be taking away one subject, 3 units of a very important course. And that's where I share the concern of the minority floor leader, that these are 36 important units, life skills, working skills that our future workforce have yet to develop. So I would be I would personally, with all due respect, proceed with caution when we try to load the curriculum with our own the details of what we would want, because then we would all want to do that, no? I would want to save the climate, save the world, save the climate, and fill the curriculum also with environmental discussions, environmental awareness, and so on and so forth. So I hope that His Honor, as chair of the committee on higher education as well, would take note of that concern, because all of us would like to pursue very valid causes, and I support this cause. But I truly believe that there are ways that we can go about it without violating the Constitution and still pursuing the objective of His Honor.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Thank you to our dear colleague from Taguig for reminding us. It is important to note also that during the hearing, we touched on this academic freedom, which is among the consideration, Mr. President, why the required general education curriculum was reduced from 63 units to 36 units.
Yes.
Again, we are only integrating labor education in the revised core subjects, totaling to 12 units. And we are amenable to any amendments that would be raised here on the floor or be introduced by our colleagues. it must be in the core subjects po kasi because it is the set of subjects that is common to all and is mandated by CHED. So ito po yung mamomonitor ng CHED. So yun lang yung gusto nating ma-attain, Mr. President. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Mr. President. I will end my interpellation at this point. Again, by highlighting the 4 C's that are needed by our students and the future workforce: critical thinking, communication, collaboration, creativity. It is my humble belief that these 4 skills can be integrated and learned in all subject matters. And the issues, we can talk about any issues, whether it's environment, it's human rights, it's labor rights, children's welfare, senior citizens. We can talk about a lot of these issues and we can all put it in the curriculum. But at the end of the day, what do we need our youth to be focusing on in those 12 units that His Honor mentioned? It will just be a matter of time that all of us would want to put our specific concerns and agenda within this curriculum, Mr. President. That is just my concern. And so I humbly submit that by focusing and trusting in the education system and still passing a similar bill, no, that would highlight the importance of this kind of subject matter, we should be able to trust that the system will allow these subject matters to be taught in the way that it should reach the children. And again, every institution will differ to a certain extent, because otherwise, I fear that 6 years from now, we will have this discussion and there will be 10 other issues that ipipilit po natin na masama ho sa curriculum natin. Yun lang talaga yung worry ko. And who am I to say that one person's priority subject matter is less than somebody else's? I do believe that they are all relevant, they are all important, and that's why we have these implementing agencies who will ensure that they provide a wholesome education to our students and choose the best way that it can be done. So in the section 6, in fact, where His Honor's bill refers to the power of CHED, or the mandate of CHED, the mandate we are giving CHED, that should the GE subjects be changed, CHED will identify. Again, I feel like that is already an encroachment on the academic freedom principle that is espoused in the Constitution. With all due respect, Mr. President, I hope His Honor can appreciate that I support and I believe in the cause, but I also would like to balance this with constitutional provisions and the learnings that your humble colleague has also come across in my other committee that also touches on the SDG 8, which is decent work, which His Honor, I'm sure, is very familiar with, and the SDG on education as well, and poverty alleviation. They all go hand in hand. Thank you so much, Mr. President, and dear sponsor, for taking time to listen to my concerns. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Pia. We appreciate your valuable points. Let me also give mine, and if you would allow me, in the Higher Education Act of 94, there's a mandate for CHED to set and implement minimum standards. So that's what we wanted to accomplish here. We make sure that CHED would only work in implementing and setting minimum standards. But we thank the distinguished ladies' comments and pointers. We will take note of that. Thank you to our dear colleagues. I think it's almost time, Mr. President, because there's only 2 of us here, and the Senate President needs his date, Mr. President. So I will also ask my distinguished colleagues to just continue next time, Mr. President.
Mr. President, just one question or 2 questions, if the gentleman will allow it.
Mr. President, I believe Senator Tolentino would like to propound some questions. Although a reminder to our colleagues, it is date night of our presiding officer.
Before I
worry,
ask my questions, I
good majority
congratulate
floor,
the
wala
Senate
po kami ni
President.
Joel date. So we can stay here until the wee hours. But nevertheless,
Wala na pala si Senate President. It's the single gentleman from Valenzuela. hanggang 3 o'clock in the morning pa yan, maiwan sa Senate, Mr. President. Mr. President, may recognize Senator Tolentino with the permission, of course, of Senator Joel.
If the good gentleman from Bulacan would yield to just 2 questions.
Sure, most definitely from the gentleman from Cavite. Thank you.
Mr. President, I do agree with the points raised by the minority leader as well as Senator Cayetano that the span and scope of labor laws is really too wide for an ordinary student to study, and I would not regurgitate the points raised by the minority leader who was already labor secretary when I was still initially practicing with the NLRC in a dilapidated building right in front of the University of Santo Tomas in España. So this is really a very difficult subject matter. Perhaps the good sponsor would probably agree to a revised, compressed Labor 101 version of this. Would the gentleman agree to have that as part of the amendments?
Yes, definitely, Mr. President. We will submit to the wisdom of the body, especially if you're talking about guru's guru. We have a Senate Minority Floor Leader who's been with the labor sector for God knows how long. So, and with the brilliant minds of our colleagues, Senator Pia, Senator Tol, we will submit, Mr. President.
Perhaps a basic labor laws education, a primer on labor laws 101, or even perhaps we have some law books available not in another jurisdiction in the States, labor laws for dummies, labor laws in a nutshell, Hornbook labor laws. Senator Angara is familiar with this. Perhaps and if the good sponsor can recall that a few months ago, together with the presiding officer, they sponsored a bill which was enacted into a law, which I think would be very much applicable here. It is the Good Manners and Right Conduct law, Mr. President. And I foresee that the application of that law can be expanded to mean not just for basic education, but for higher education as well. So what I'm saying is this, Mr. President, perhaps the good sponsor can think of ways on how to encapsulate in his proposed measure the timeless values such as the leadership mentioned by Senator Cayetano, industry, patience, hard work as part of the bill without putting so much pressure on provisions of law that would probably be hard for a lay student to comprehend, because as what the good minority leader mentioned a while ago, this is a 6-unit law course. Perhaps encapsulating it in a protection of rights, narrow provision for workers. Would the good sponsor from Bulacan agree to that proposal, perhaps in the period of amendments?
We'll do that, Mr. President. We're amenable to that, and just want to spread again into the records, as clearly stated by the distinguished gentleman from Cavite, we pass into law ito pong integration of GMRC and values education in the basic education, and then in some cases we have integrated climate change, disaster prevention, etc. So that is the main goal, Mr. President, of this measure, to enable to ensure that our graduating students would have at least a basic knowledge on labor education program. Thank you.
Perhaps in the period of amendments, I will be proposing some of the amendments that can be gleaned from my interpellation. I see Senator Angara smiling because he is familiar with my labor law secrets, which I will not reveal at this point in time. So, Mr. President, I thank the good gentleman from Bulacan. I have no further questions, but congratulate him for the intent of proposing this measure, which is really to empower our future workers, in the words of Senator Cayetano, future thinkers on how to approach innovativeness with the right mindset and equipped with the proper labor laws. Maraming salamat po, Senator Villanueva.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, distinguished colleague from Cavite. I appreciate your inputs, valuable inputs. And we look forward to working with you and the rest of our colleagues. Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. President, I think one last to manifest, not to just manifest, I believe Senator Sani Angara, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President. I don't delay the proceedings. I just want to, if I have Senator Tolentino's permission, I think he should be recruited by our committee chairman of labor as one of those who will develop the labor curriculum, because according to him, he would have been a top 10 top notcher of the bar if not for his labor examiner. And he revealed something to me about his labor examiner. He was a former labor secretary who may or may not have been a member of this chamber, Mr. President. No, I'll leave it at that, and it's up to Senator Tolentino to fill in the blanks, Mr. President. But I think he's very qualified, Mr. President.
President,
Thank you.
Is it by the initials, Mr. President? Is it by the initials of FMD?
Mr. President, I never gave my consent to Senator Angara to reveal some secrets, Mr. President.
Mr. President, may we recognize Senator Ontiveros for our last point?
Senator Hontiveros recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd just like briefly to make of record my support to my chairman in the Senate Committee on Labor for the intentions embodied in this labor education bill. And I hope I will still have the time to, if not interpolate, then to propose strengthening amendments. Thank you, Mr. President, and congratulations, good sponsor.
Thank you very much, Senator Risa. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Majority floor.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, may we ask our secretariat if there's another additional reference of business, because we filed some bills, quite important measures, hopefully to be referred to the proper committee.
Admin matter.
Oh. Now, Mr. President, before we take that up, may I move with the permission of the body to proceed with the Senate President's designation of the Senate Conferees of the Bicameral Conference Committee on the disagreeing provisions of Senate Bill number 1807 and House Bill number 5422. This is the Cooperative Code Month.
Majority
National
floor, before
Cooperative
we
Code
do
Month.
that, let's
Yes.
move to suspend the
Oh, my apologies, Mr. President.
bid of
Yes.
Senator Joel.
My move to suspend consideration of the previous measure.
Any
My
objections?
apologies.
Hearing none, motion's carried.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I move again with my previous motion on the bicameral conference on these bills, disagreeing provisions on these two bills.
The following members are hereby designated as Senate conferees to the Bicameral Conference Committee on the disagreeing provisions of Senate Bill number 1807 and House Bill number 5422. They are Senator Zubiri as chairperson, Senator Lapid, and for the minority, Senator Hontiveros.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yes, it's just a paper bicam, so we just we have to do this for our process. Mr. President, is there another? Are we ready for the additional reference of business? Maybe ask the secretary. If not, we can do this tomorrow.
The secretary is not ready yet, Mr. Majority Floor. So we can suspend first.
Okay.
Suspend a few minutes.
We asked for this is about a bill that we authored together with Senator Recto, Senator Drilon. The meeting we had the other day requested by the President on the emergency powers given for anti-red tape. So the earlier we can refer it already to the committee, the better. So if it's not ready, I believe my staff is asking if we can ask for a 1-minute suspension for our colleagues. But actually, Mr. President, well, I would rather that we refer it today so that tomorrow the committee can actually set the schedule by next week. So if we can ask, with the permission of our colleagues, a 1-minute suspension to allow our secretary to prepare the additional reference of business.
All right.
I move for a 1-minute suspension, Mr. President.
Suspended. Majority floor.
Mr. President. Yes, thank you, Mr. President. I believe the reference of business is ready. I move for the reference of business, additional reference of business.
Is there any objection? Hearing none, motion's carried.
Second additional reference of business, bills on first reading. Senate number 1841, an act establishing a technical education and skills development authority, test the training and assessment center in the municipality of Cabagan, province of Isabela, to be known as the Cabagan Isabela Test the Training and Assessment Center and appropriating funds therefore, introduced by Senator Binay.
Referred to the committees on higher technical and vocational education and finance.
Senate number 1842, an act defining and criminalizing extrajudicial killings and related acts, guaranteeing state obligation to effectively investigate extrajudicial killings and ensure documentation thereof, providing for reparation for victims of extrajudicial killings and appropriating funds therefore and for other purposes, introduced by Senator De Lima.
Referred to the Committee on Justice and Human Rights.
Senate number 1843, an act introducing a rent relief subsidy program to assist residential tenants and lessors adversely impacted by the economic crisis brought upon by COVID-19 pandemic and for other purposes, introduced by Senator De Lima.
Referred to the Committee on Urban Planning, Housing, and Resettlement.
Senate number 1844, an act authorizing the President to expedite the processing and issuance of national and local permits, licenses, and certifications, introduced by Senator Soto III, Recto, Zubiri, Drilon, and Lacson.
Referred to the Committee on Civil Service, Government Reorganization, and Professional Regulation, Trade, Commerce, and the Committee on Trade, Commerce, and Entrepreneurship. Majority floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. With that, I move that just a reminder to our colleagues that we'll be taking up, of course, aside from the final amendments of our Coco Levy Fund, we will start discussing the CREATE bill as well, Mr. President. With that, I move that we adjourn session until 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Wednesday, September 23, 2020. I so move, Mr. President.
Is there any objection? There being none, the session is adjourned until 3 o'clock in the afternoon of Wednesday, September 23, 2020.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone.